Hey everyone, so I made a video like 2 days ago where I kind of gave you a list of interview questions that one of my Discord users was asked. This same user came back to me. This is a different set of questions that were given to him by a different company. I want to kind of go through them and maybe talk about them, and you guys can judge for yourself if these are worth asking to a junior full stack developer during an interview. So same format as last time. Basically, I'll just read through these. So for the first question he was asked is, if I am storing a string in variable, how much memory it's going to take? And again, these are like the questions that he jots down after the interview so that he can like keep them in his head. Okay, so usually I think a string in JavaScript is 2 bytes per character. So if you have like a word that says dog, then that would be 3 characters times 2 bytes. Now, I had to go Google this because honestly, the last time I had to go look up how much memory something is stored in, like how much memory something uses in JavaScript, that's not something that you really think about or need to care about, in my opinion. Like, this is a question that I feel like would be asked for like a C++ developer or someone who needs to build like the next Crisis game in C, because where memory is like really important to make sure you're managing it correctly. But for web development, for building a website that basically like requests data from an API and sends it back to a user, I don't think I've ever actually had to think about like, how much memory is this string going to use? Or how much memory should I send over the wire? Now, I will say, like, if you're doing like WebSockets and you're trying to make like an online game with the browser, then yeah, you probably need to think about like how much data is going across the wire, because for every byte that costs money, right? It costs money to send bytes across the wire, and it slows it down a little bit. So it's good to understand this, but for an interview question for a junior full stack, I can't even imagine why this would be useful to ask. You guys in the comments, leave your opinions on these questions. I think most of these are dumb questions. So second question, 1 bit equals to how many bytes? Again, like these questions kind of scream computer science homework quiz, right? Like this is something that you get when you're doing like a computer science degree and like you're studying for your end of semester test, and these are the questions they give you. Which again, I would not even ask any developers these, because like who cares? But if you do want to know, 1 bit equals to how many bytes. Now I think he has the thing reversed here. It's actually 1 byte is equal to how many bits, and it's 8 bits in a byte. So then if you want to like kind of further, your knowledge on bytes and bits and stuff, in web development, we do a lot of hexadecimal for like coloring things sometimes. So like, you want to color something red, you might do this or whatever color that is. Hexadecimal is again another format of like taking a numeric and putting it into bytes and bits, and every character represents 4 bits. Now, is this related to the question? Not really, but it's kind of like interesting to talk about, I guess. So this F here, if you go 2 to the 4, I think that gives you 16. So 2 to the 4 gives you, of course, it gives you 16. So for every character in here, like you have 0 through 9, plus you have A through F. If you add those up, that's 10 total characters here for the numbers, plus A, B, C, D, E, F, 6. That's 16 total combinations of like what this thing could be. And every character represents a structure of like the byte array. So like, for example, F would be 1, 2, 3, 4. If you were to look at like binary, F would kind of convert to all ones. 0 would convert to 4 zeros. If you wanted to do 5 or 4, that would be like 0, 0. I think this would be 4. Anyway, I'm getting over my head. Like, this stuff's not important to me. This stuff is kind of fun to learn about, but I don't think I've ever done any type of binary or bits or bytes in any of my like web development career. I think I had to do like a bit mask one time, where like if you have like a bunch of bits, if you have like a bunch of bits and you want to figure out like if this bit is on, like how do you do that? Well, you can do a bitwise AND like this, and then this will give you true, I believe. Actually, it might not even give you true. I think it'll just give you 1, 2, 3, 4. Give you that. So I mean, I've done this like maybe once, but that's for like more like game stuff. Anyway, first 2 questions kind of suck. Question 3, how internet works client to server. Now this is a kind of a good question. I think this one's kind of important to understand. Now I don't know, like they're wanting the lower level of like handshakes and stuff, because honestly I'd have to go refresh my memory about that. But like when you load up your browser and you go to type in a domain in your browser, that makes a request to a DNS server. And I think it even makes a request to like a local cache running in your machine first to see if you've seen this domain first and what IP address it points to. So I believe, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, these are just things I'm kind of going off my memory. And if I don't know it, then it's probably not as important to know. So let me see if I can kind of answer this. So like how the internet works. So load up browser, type in domain, and press enter. What happens after you do that and press enter? Well, your browser looks at computer DNS cache to see if it already knows the IP. Okay, so like to understand how the internet works in domains and stuff, you have to know, I think this is also down here, question 4, kind of related. You have to know what IP address. Every computer on the internet has a custom IP address. Some of those are behind routers. So like one router could kind of be a blanket IP for many computers. But you need to know like where does the request need to go when I press in enter in the domain. So somehow like a DNS lookup happen if that IP/domain mapping is not already in your local laptop's cache, it'll go to a DNS server. Fail back to lookup in DNS server. So like there's a bunch of servers out there, like Google has DNS servers that basically act as a giant lookup table. So when you type in like google.com, that does a request to a DNS server. And typically I think your DNS server is provided to you by your internet provider, like a default one, but I think you can override that if you want to. And a lot of people point their DNS directly to Google's DNS or whatever DNS they like. And then that will send you back an IP address and a bunch of other information about the request. It'll send you a bunch of information about DNS records, right? So something that's worth mentioning is there's something called DNS records. There's A records. There's C name records. I think there's like a mail record or TMX record. I don't remember the specifics, honestly. It's been a while since I messed with domains. These two are the ones you usually mess with the most. But there's also domains records that you can set up if you wanted to like forward a domain and give, like for example, Route 53 and Amazon access to create a zone and have that zone control all the subdomains and stuff like that. I forget the specifics, but there's something like that going on. So yeah, this will do a failback and it'll look up at a DNS server to get the IP. And once the browser has the IP, it'll do a TCP request to the IP, which is just a server, right? The IP is connected to a server, which is hosting some files usually, or it's like hosting an API. And I should also say like, so if this is over HTTPS, there's like a handshake that goes on where you like your computer and the server like exchange some type of private keys and public keys so that the data can be encrypted. And I think there's also a TCP handshake or something. There might be, I'm going to say the terminology wrong, but the concepts I think are good to explain in an interview, even if you can't 100% say the right terminology. And that's why I have comments, so you guys can call me out when I say incorrect terms, because I know how frustrated it gets you when I say the wrong term for something. I have seen it. Okay, so if it's over HTTPS, which all traffic should be, then I believe there's like a certificate that needs to be looked up on the DNS server, and then the certificate is used to verify the keys that come back from the back end. This is stuff that I learned at one point and then I forgot because I don't really care. I just make sure that it's, you get the lock icon. But it's something that you could easily go and look back up and read a blog post and like understand the nitty gritty details of. But I think there's like an exchange of keys, private and public keys, and then the DNS certificate, I guess it's called an SSL certificate, is used. I don't remember how it's used, honestly. I think like it might be used for, but then after all that stuff is set up, an HTTP GET request is made to the server. along with like some headers and stuff. So like you'll send request headers, you'll send request body, and there'll be stuff in the URL and stuff. And then like the server will respond with their own headers, such as like cookies or authorization bearer tokens and stuff like that. And I guess I should also say server will process the request and respond with their own headers and payload. And then once the browser gets the request or gets the response, it'll parse the response and like if it's HTML or something, parse the HTML and then it'll display it. And I guarantee you there's some places in this whole area that I did not explain or I skipped over, and there's stuff that I'm missing, but that's like the general idea. Is like you have computers that need to talk to each other. It's much easier to have a domain that you rent, and that domain will point to an IP address of another machine. So when I go to google.com, basically this stuff is happening behind the scenes where it makes a request to an IP, and then a lot of this stuff happens. Now, I 100% did not get this 100% accurate, but I think just laying out the general gist is good enough if they were to ask a question like this. But again, this is like a full stack role. This isn't like a networking system admin role. I guess you could say it's so important to understand how this stuff kind of works, but this isn't stuff that I learned as a junior. I'll be honest. This is stuff I learned much later in my career. Fourth question, when XYZ app is hosted on server at some place, how does the browser know which server it is? There are many servers in app hosted. I don't really, I think I kind of answered this here. I mean, these two questions are very similar. How internet works, and then also this is like, how does a domain point to an app? Now this one I might have gone too into the weeds of the domain stuff here. Maybe the internet, how it works is more of like talking about internet providers and stuff that I honestly don't know. I mean, like you have a cord that connects to the wall in your house. That cord goes to like a telephone wire. There's probably some hubs that shares, you know, your apartment complex with all these other people. There's routers that distribute traffic and packets. Packets usually have like headers and IPs on them and other stuff. Honestly, I don't know why this was asked. But yeah, I kind of already answered this one. I will say there's maybe you can mention like, okay, well, this IP address could be behind a load balancer. So your app could be 10 different machines with all different IPs, but then you have like a load balancer in front of many machines on different IP addresses hosting your app, because maybe you want to handle scaling. But typically the DNS record will point to the load balancer. So you'll make a request, DNS points to the load balancer will round robin, throw in some keywords, some buzzwords in there and make you look smart. Could potentially round robin the request to any of these machines that are like behind the load balancer. So if you have like 100 machines that are all hosting your app, every request will just be routed to one of them. Now there's different ways to set up the load balancer. You could do like sticky sessions or like sticky IPs or whatever it's called, where every time you do a request, it's going to send you to the same machine if you want that. There's ways to like set up the load balancer to send your traffic to the least overworked machine. So it kind of like keeps track of what machines have gotten which requests, and then it'll try to send traffic to less overworked machines. Fifth question, what is TCP and UDP? Now this one I can only kind of explain this at a really high level. So TCP is like a connection protocol. I don't even know I don't know what the acronym is. TCP. I know the P is protocol, transfer something, communication protocol. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. TCP is what browsers do when you do like a GET request. It's like the standard that we use for HTTP requests with like GET, POST, delete, whatever. And basically it creates a connection between a client and a server, and it guarantees that the data will go across the wire, right? So if I try to send a message to my web server, if for some reason I don't get like an acknowledgement or a response for that request, TCP will actually retry the request. Because when you send stuff over the internet, if you don't use TCP and you're using something like UDP, there's something called packet loss. And like when you do the request, you'll never get a response back because the packet never made it to the server, or the server's packet never made it to you. So the main difference is UDP packets can be lost, and retries are not automatic. Okay, so you'll send a message to the server, you never get a response back, that's it. You have to handle that error handling on your side to make sure that you get some type of acknowledgement back, or that you retry if something is not working the way you expect it. Now TCP, this is like how we build out all web applications. Packets will be retried when lost. Now there's like so much more in depth into all this that I can't answer because I never really took the time to go and look into it. I know like the TCP and the UDP, they have like a target IP import that you're trying to hit. They have like a source IP import so that the server, when they get the request, they know what to send back. And then there's like this whole header that describes like the payload and like what is going to be in the payload, like where are the headers placed in this payload, where's the body placed in the payload. That's all I can really talk about that. There's people out there. I know there's a good YouTuber, I forget his name, but he does a bunch of backend related content. He'd be able to kill this question, but me, I don't really know, because again, this is an abstraction away from making requests to a server. And as a web developer, we don't care honestly about this. Unless you're building like a really high performant streaming system, then yeah, maybe you need to know when to use TCP or UDP, but you're probably using a library. And again, as a junior, like I don't really think you'd even need to worry about that too much. Sixth question, which isn't really even a question, this is more of an insult. You're saying UDP is fast and this is vague. Answer, since you're not able to explain. So I guess that's what the interviewer responded when he tried to answer question 5. But yeah, I guess UDP's faster because there is no handshake. There is no overhead of like making that connection handshake, I believe, in the retries potentially. But I'd probably kill that question. There's probably so much I missed. So question 6, really nothing there. 7th question, what services use UDP? So usually like streaming services, because you want to send over these bytes and you don't really care if like a packet gets lost because it's just like a quick little blip in the, let's say you're doing a video streaming service and a packet gets lost. Well, it doesn't matter because the user is just going to see a little quick like flash in the images and they may not see that, that frame, I guess it's called in the video. Like audio streaming, video and audio streaming are a good way to do it. I'm guessing Netflix probably uses UDP. Again, I don't really know. I'm just guessing. Like anytime you need like real-time data, usually it's a good idea to use UDP if you don't care if packets can get lost or if you don't want to like implement your own retry logic or something. I think TCP also guarantees ordering. Now that I think about it, might guarantee ordering. I could be wrong. I don't know. But I think like if I were to send 5 TCP packets, they're going to arrive to the server in order and they're going to come back in order. I think UDP is just going to be like whatever order they come in, they come in. I could be completely wrong with that, so you guys can grill me in the comments. Which services use UDP? I know games like using UDP because you want that real-time responsiveness and you don't care if like a packet of the player moving right gets dropped because there's probably like 10 other packets coming in over the wire that tell the player to move right. 8th question, come on, you're an engineering student, you should know all this, and I lost all the confidence to think. So I don't even know, he didn't even write down the 8th question, he just got insulted by the interviewer, and the last thing he was asked to do was work on a full stack assignment within 24 hours and submit the code. And this assignment was basically build a full stack app, I'll say MERN app, and then ability for the user to upload a file, ability for user to sign in using Google Auth. I think he said OAuth 2. So you could do like Passport.js or something. Now there was a requirement that you want to upload the file to S3. Ability for user to see all previously uploaded files. Ability for user to download an uploaded file. And that was a requirement. So he had to, in 24 hours, he was asked to build a kind of like a full stack MERN app where basically you can upload files to a backend. That backend would persist those files, and you can download those files at a later point. So that was an interview from a Discord user who lives in India. And he says he's been getting a lot of interviews like this where they ask questions that are so like unrelated to the job, in my opinion. Like, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to understand like how many bytes is this string saving? Like, is that going to help you write a React application or a Node.js backend application? For 95% of the use cases, probably not, honestly. Now, for this stuff as well, how does the internet work? Yeah, there's some higher level things that you need to understand. But for the most part, as a junior, you don't care. You just know that you can do fetch and pass in a URL and you get back data. Like, you don't really need to know what's happening behind the scenes. And that's the beauty of abstractions. We've abstracted away this lower level implementation detail so that we can focus on just solving business problems. I think the domain and the DNS stuff is good to know though. So at some point, like I think you should try to learn like the overall way of all that stuff, how it works. It's good to understand like how load balancers kind of work. TCP, UDP, like I think what I put here is probably the most you kind of need to be able to say. There's probably a lot more nitty gritty details about these things, and there's probably some things I got wrong, but I think mainly the retries and the packet losses, I don't know about the ordering. And then what services would you use UDP? So I don't know if the position was for like a streaming service he was trying to get into, because like why else would they ask all these questions about lower level protocols? Really weird. And then this one is just like throwing salt on the wound. Like you're gonna ask someone to deliver a full stack MERN app in 24 hours. Like you shouldn't even say 24 hours. Like honestly, like you gotta sleep, right? So you really only have like 12 hours to work on this. And this is just kind of judging, like, has the person worked with these technologies before, and do they have like, I don't know. I will say that I actually worked on building this out. Like I saw this question and I'm like, how hard would it be for me to build it out? It took me about like 2 hours to do. And I've used all this technology before. So if you haven't used S3 before, like, I don't think you're gonna be able to figure this out in 24 hours. Like maybe you can if you're really experienced, but as a junior, even Passport.js is really confusing to me. I mean, I got it all working. I have like my application set up that kind of solves this problem, and I plan to make a video to give like a walkthrough or maybe solve this live for you all. But I don't know, this interview is rough. So at this point, I'm feeling sorry for people who have to interview in the web dev world, because it's like you guys are being asked the most ridiculous questions that are very unrelated to web dev. And I don't know why they're really asking these questions. Like, let me rephrase that. These are related to web dev. These are important to know. But as a junior whose job is to just like implement features on a UI or fix small bugs in a UI or a backend, these literally make no difference to know about. This assignment was a little rough. Like a take-home assignment, you can only get 24 hours. That's a little rough. So I feel sorry for people who are currently doing interviews in the world. I didn't realize how garbage these interviews are and how much of a pain it is. This Discord user has mentioned that he's just wanting to give up on programming, and he's kind of over all this because the barrier to entry is so high for a simple like junior position that it's just like, I think he's been trying to land a job for 3 months now, and he has a full year of experience. So it's just a sad world we live in. And I wish there was an easier way to like have interviewers actually quiz on the things that are important and not gatekeep on computer science quiz questions, in my opinion. But if you guys liked watching this little video of me just talking through these questions, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, press the bell icon, leave a comment if you have anything that you want to add to these. And like always, I have a Discord if you want to talk to me directly or just get help if you're stuck with learning how to program. The link is in the description. Go ahead and click that, join my Discord, and I'll be happy to see you around. Have a good day and happy coding.